In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Hi, welcome to Materialise, the Launch Tabletop podcast, where we talk about turning game ideas into tangible objects. Today is the 13th of January, 2023, and this is episode 10. We're in double figures. So today's topic is You're a Scientist and a Game Designer, featuring Tegan. All right. Hello, everybody. I will come through now single rather than doing these big. I always muck this up. I say hello, everyone, and everyone responds one together, and it doesn't work. It's a cacophony of noise. So I will do this a bit more orderly. Hello, Kate. How are you?
I'm just delightful. I'm a happy little Vegemite. And you know why?
Why?
Because hot cross buns are in the shops.
Ooh. I'm not a big fan of them. Sorry if
that's all right. Take. I'll eat them.
Yeah, you can have mine. Yeah. And I forgot to say I'm Eris and I'm your host. I completely forgot to even mention that. So anyway, there you go. So I've got a question, Kate. Have you been listening to any music this week? Any bands or albums that have been on high rotation for you?
Not really. I have some stick my head down and get stuck in playlists that are just a wide variety of stuff that I know really well that I don't have to think about. One of them, in fact, is the soundtrack to the first Iron Man movie, which I love.
Is the Iron Man 2 soundtrack that had a lot of AC/DC? I don't remember what's on the first.
Oh, they all have some AC/DC.
They do.
Yeah,
but I remember.
Back
I
in
think
black. The first scene.
Yeah, but the second one I remember they actually released. I remember like it was a foiled printed album because I remember seeing it in the shops, and it was all AC/DC. Like they had a special Iron Man 2 AC/DC like album because they did some kind of But
I didn't like the Iron Man 2 movie, so I haven't really listened to the soundtrack. I thought it was
fair enough.
Honestly, not a very nice movie. It was unpleasant. First one though, love that.
See, Iron Man 3 is my favorite. It's probably
that one's quite nice.
It's in my top 3. And well, the key. So I like the overall movie, even though it's got some obvious problems. But like the key thing for me was it was one of the first times I really saw a superhero character, and that may have happened before. But first I really saw it, who had panic attacks and like anxiety attacks. And when I saw it, that was when I was starting to really know that was happening to me because it'd been happening for years. I didn't know what it was, and so seeing that kind of displayed, in the movies was like, oh, this is like really relatable.
This happens to other people. Yeah.
And I think, anyway. So, okay, let's look at this. This isn't a pop culture podcast, so let's move on. So, welcome, Alan. How are you?
Hi, I'm happy as a Vegemite because Kate got her hot cross buns.
Do you put Vegemite on hot cross buns, either of you? Or Tegan,
I don't.
Any of you?
But I know someone who does. She has Vegemite and cheese on her hot cross buns.
Wow,
I am not related to this
combination.
Person. She swears it's delicious.
I love Vegemite, but not on a hot cross bun.
Yeah, I like Vegemite, but just warm with butter for me.
We're also Aussie, like we like Vegemite.
I hate Vegemite.
You don't like
I can't
Vegemite.
stand it.
Fair enough. Yeah, you're representing the other side. That's good.
Yeah, you can have the Vegemite.
I don't think I can call you Australian then.
Oh, wow.
So sad.
Have you been listening to anything particularly this week, Alan? Any music, albums, or artists that you have been on your playlist?
Only the stuff that my kids play over and over and over again. I've got a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old, and TikTok is all I hear. And Tiny Violin, I think, is the song.
Oh, I don't know it.
You don't know it? Yeah,
I'm not a TikToker. Sorry.
It's one of those that has like 1,000 words in the song, and it goes really fast. So
I discovered there's a name for that genre. It's called nightcore.
Oh, is it?
Sped up stuff. Nightcore. We got cottage.
This one's not. It's not. It's This one's not sped up, but the whole thing is at high school. My daughter is all the kids know the lyrics, back to front, so they can sing it really fast, and that's the thing.
Yeah, wow.
Okay.
Very cool. So this week we are joined by special guest Tegan E. Smith. Hi, Tegan.
Hi. Thanks for having
Tegan
me.
is a. You're very welcome to be here.
Are you also a happy Vegemite?
I am a happy Vegemite, absolutely.
but
is it
is it on
because
hot
Kate got her cross ones also?
Is it because Kate got her cross?
Mainly the hot cross buns, other things too.
So Tegan is a scientist, a communicator, and a board game designer. She has a PhD, and now this is where I've changed my notes. It says in Earth Sciences here, so that's very broad. We'll get more into detail that later on. She's also a board member for the Australian Science Innovations, and has just recently had her first game signed with a publisher. So congratulations, Kate. I'm sorry, not Kate. You're Tegan. Tegan. That's a. I'm just seeing the names on the screen, and my brain's like, whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Friday. So yeah, congratulations, Tegan.
Thank you.
It's a
Thank you.
huge
I'm very
milestone.
excited.
Yeah, it's so good. And obviously we'll talk a bit more about that in detail later on. So how about we move into this week's launch table tip? So each week we try and share a little piece of advice that will hopefully help people who are designing or publishing or printing games. So Tegan, I believe you had a question that you might want to ask us.
Yeah, so I when I'm working on my prototypes and stuff, I use software like I used to use Adobe Illustrator. More lately, I've been using Affinity Designer, and something that I sort of deal with but don't really understand is when it comes to colors, when you can choose between CMYK and RGB color. Like, I sort of understand some of the theory behind additive and negative colors, but not really what that means when I'm using design software. And also, I guess the more sort of tangible question for you is, what can I do to sort of minimize the uncertainty when I'm going to send something off to a printer? And I am aware that screens vary and printers vary. So even when I'm using a specific hex code or Pantone color, I don't necessarily know exactly what I'm going to get. So my question for you is sort of, what do I need to know, or what can I do to reduce that uncertainty and send off my files and hopefully get back what I'm after?
Yeah, thanks for that. Kate, did you want to start us off?
Such a good question, because it's such a big topic. Yeah, I have a couple of tips. So the first is understand, or have a basic understanding, because it, like light and color and stuff, that's like questions for physicists and philosophers, but understand basically what the gamut refers to for CMYK and RGB. So we've just got a URL up there on the
which is very long.
thing. It's very long, but what I am going to do is I'm going to quickly present a Chrome tab, if I can find it. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. Here we are. So we have an illustration here. This is a simplified illustration. This is not pure science. This is somebody making it digestible. So the big circle shows us on a basic level all of the visible light in the spectrum of light. So these are the things that you can see. There's stuff that exists outside that. People know about infrared, you know about ultraviolet, those sorts of things. This is what we can see. Inside that visible spectrum, we have, inside the yellow line, we've got the RGB color gamut. So those are all of the colors that you can reproduce on a modern screen. Inside that, there is a much smaller blue area, and that's what CMYK can do. So if I stop sharing that, go and have a look at the URL, have a think about it. It's very interesting.
I'll bring up the URL again.
Don't get lost in your thoughts, because it's very bamboozling.
You can also just use your search engine to search for the difference between CMYK and RGB. There's a lot of articles on it. We've got an article that explores some of it as well on our website as well. So I don't have the link. Of course, I didn't save the link for our own website because I'm very organized.
I'll pop that one together. So when you're working with colors, there are some colors that you can paint on a screen that we can't reproduce in CMYK simply because CMYK doesn't extend that far. So that's the first tip that I have. Have a really basic understanding that there are things that you cannot do in CMYK. And there are certain tones of colors that you just can't do with it. So Eris, remind me, what are they? They're really vivid blues and greens.
Greens,
Oranges?
oranges are normally the big difficult
Yeah.
one. But in all honesty, almost all colors, like if
They
you're talking
go
about
at some point.
CMYK is a mix of 4 inks, and that means that unless you're using one of those 4 inks in its pure form, everything is an amalgamation. So you're never going to get it as pure as if you're
Dulled
using
in some way.
compared to an ink that's specifically mixed to be whatever that color is, like if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So
Yeah. And the other tip that I have is whenever you're working, always have your documents set to CMYK, because it won't show you things that are only RGB in that case. You'll be like, this is much closer to what I will eventually get.
I agree with Kate on that. The only counterpoint would be if you are doing anything in any software that you have layers and you can do blending mode, so you can change it to multiply or screen or some other blending mode. They don't work the same and they don't work as well in CMYK mode. So if you're doing some kind of layout that you want to use those blending modes, it might be better to work in RGB, but you have to make sure at the very end, when you've saved your flattened, image file, convert it to CMYK. But you will notice almost every time the image gets duller and it doesn't look quite as dramatic, but that's about the only way to deal with that.
Yeah.
Again, it's to do with how blending modes, they apply the maths on the things. So when you're applying RGB maths, you're adding more vivid colors, and then they clamp. Clamping is when a color goes out of a spectrum, and then they have to clamp it into what the closest amount is.
Oh, yeah.
So if you do the maths and then you clamp it in, it's much better that you get a more vibrant source value and then clamp it in, rather than to have 2 dull images and then you're blending that, because then you're further dulling it. So working with RGB is just giving you more to work with to begin with, and then you.
But Kate's advice is valid. Like when I'm doing anything that I know is going to be, like I've got a 99% certainty is going to be printed, I will try and work in CMYK, and I'll only work in RGB if I absolutely kind of have to. So yeah.
So the way I do it, and if you're
we're
not
going to have different ways.
If you're not comfortable doing it this way, I suggest do it Kate's way is the safest way. But typically my differences is that when it comes to artwork, I keep it in RGB. And anything else, everything else like text, graphical elements, anything that I do layout is always going to be CMYK, because then I'm usually importing those images into my layout software, and then I can work in CMYK afterwards.
Yeah. So do
there
you
are
have
so
any
many different methods, and they're all valid.
Yeah, and the important part really is that when you're putting together your layout file for print, that you make sure that's in CMYK, and that you're not, and be aware that when you are converting, if you get an illustration from Illustrator or you've made it yourself in, an image, drawing or editing app or whatever, that understand that there's a good chance the colors would come in dull. Now, some of the illustrators that we work with, like the main person who's done a lot of work for us named Stephen Preston, he's done a lot of my Robots and Rockets artwork, and he's done heaps of artwork for Launch Tabletop. He will work in, if he knows the project is going to be a printed one, he works in CMYK to begin with his actual like illustrations. Not all illustrators do that, but he's obviously decided that it's worth him doing that. And so that can be helpful, because it means that there's never really a question, will it print, is it going to print kind of okay? So Alan, did you have any other tip?
I have one quick tip. Don't be too hung up on color consistency. It doesn't exist. Unfortunately.
There's
and the
so many
reason
variables.
is so many. Even if you give someone an exact Pantone value of the ink that you use, that color may change just by the fact that the paper that you're printing out on has a different whiteness to another paper. And not just the whiteness level, but also the varnish, the kind of finish that you apply will change the color values, because that's how light works. How it bounces off the material. So just having the color exact, and then you have two projects. It's like, I've been using this, and then but I put that on a canvas material. How come the colors look different? Well, it's because the material.
It's a different material. Yeah.
So I happen to have 2 of the Pantone books here, and one of them is on uncoded and one of them is on coded. These are the same colors. So
Maybe
they look.
we should explain what Pantone is for people who
I
might
will.
not be
Yeah, I'll do it in
aware.
a second. But it was just more to show that one's on uncoded paper and one's on coded paper, and
Yeah.
and
Can you
they're
hold
radically
really,
different.
really close to each other and just zoom right in? Just because it's a little difficult.
Can someone?
To see.
I'll need one of you to make me full screen then.
Yeah, we can do that. Where's the thing? Hang on, trying to find the button. There we go.
There it is.
Yeah, so looking at that, we can see that if you look at the second row down, where it says Pantone 135 UP, the one that's
focus.
the
Lost
one
focus.
that's right on the far
It's
right, they're
lost.
totally different colours.
Yeah, if you cover your
Sorry,
face,
I'm-
then you will focus on the thing.
Yeah.
I
there
can't.
you go.
I've got books in front of my face. I can't see what I'm
Yeah.
doing.
No,
I'm
it's all good.
flying blind here. I'm flying blind here, folks. There we go.
Yeah. So
This
there's
is
a
like all I'm
big
seeing is the
difference.
back of books for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that leads into So Alan's point is spot on. It's so like there's very rarely will you get the same thing, and I think we can all relate to this on a personal level. If you've got an inkjet printer, or you use a cheaper kind of printing place, so in America, Kinko's, in Australia, like Officeworks or something like that, then if you go back again and again every couple of months, you'll find that the colors won't always match up. Let's say you're printing the same prototype or whatever. And it's just because even the same machines will have to be calibrated. Like, so my background is I worked in print shops for a few years when I started out as a graphic designer. And I had one of my jobs as a junior, the first place I worked at, was I had to do the calibration passes on some of the machines where we have to, they have pre-printed things that get scanned basically by the machine. The machine called a densometer, I think it's called. And it basically scans the dots that are coming from the printer and matches it to its own, what it thinks it should be. And then it tries to align everything up. And so the point is that we had to do those calibrations, I think weekly, but I can't remember exactly. And if a company isn't doing that, like they're just not on top of it, and even then you get variation. And so,
Well, even worse is that when you're on a offset printer, the big roller printers,
yes,
the color that's from the one edge of the roll to the other edge, there's shifts in that already. So not only is it different machines, the same machine has color variations.
Well, that's if you've got a good
across
press
the
operator,
sheet.
though. If you've got a good press operator, Alan, they'll try and make sure it's even. But that's also one of the cool innovations about offset printing is that it's actually called offset because there's more rollers in the printing press, and it doesn't just go straight from the image on the plate onto the page. It goes to another roller, which I think is called a blanket, and then it transfers the image again. And part of the roll of the blanket is to help even out the ink.
Yeah.
Am I right on that, Alan? Is that how you understand it too?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the more advanced ones, they have almost like a digital, almost like a keyboard, musical keyboard. They have light bars on it, and then it actually tells you the amount of strength that you can then readjust. So someone who is meant to be the pre-press person, they have to go in, readjust it to make sure that the colors from the very left to the very right are all consistent. But there's always slight variations. So this is where someone who's a board game manufacturer who uses those printing machines differ to just generic printers, because what they do is that they actually are very smart by making sure that the one SKU of your game, one product, or that collects, are all on the one edge, so that the gradations are consistent throughout that part. And it's about sort of how do you imposition, so laying out all your cards in a way to make sure that all the sets are consistent.
Yeah. How do you manage your content around the machine's quirks?
Yes.
But I think from a person like Tegan's point of view, like the customer putting it through, I think that obviously they don't need to know that detail. I think more being aware that even if you're getting a mass printed game on, the CMYK, so offset printing, so where you're printing thousands of copies, even then, even with people who are professionals and using great machine, there is going to be variance. Like I've seen same print run stuff where you have a slight variance between some of the shades. And the way that I learned very quickly as a graphic designer is that in nearly all cases, it doesn't matter, because like I've got this copy of this game, I'm not comparing it to 10 other games next to it to see if they're slightly different shades of color. So it doesn't actually matter if, this purple is a little bit different from the one on the, later down the print line or whatever.
Mhm.
Obviously, if you see a huge shift where it's the wrong color, that's a problem. But like in terms of just micro changes, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you just want it
Or like
internally.
cards in an expansion or something, then it can really matter.
That's
So
so
that's a big one, and that's where different publishers will have different approaches. Some will obviously work with the same printing company every time to try and then they'll try and make sure. I mean, Alan and Kate have more experience with this, so maybe one of you answer.
Well, the safest thing to do is just to send the base game to a manufacturer and make sure that when they print the expansion that they match it as best as they can.
Yeah. And communicate how important they match it.
But bearing in mind that there are some choices that you have made in the base game that will impact the consistency. For example, the cardstock that you have chosen, is it still in stock with that manufacturer? Maybe it's out of stock because you've chosen, this German imported, super fancy black cord linen, this and that, and you to get that now, because of the market rates, you don't want to get that or whatever it might be. Or that they don't even make that particular one anymore, so it's very hard to match.
Even if your publisher or even if your manufacturer assured you that they would be able to get it 3 years from now, that's not the way things turn out. I speak from
COVID hits and then everything just goes out the window.
Yeah.
All right, I'll quickly do my little bit. So we've touched on Pantone. Basically, for those who don't know, Pantone is a company which is probably the most used around the world for professional printing and color calibration services, both digital and print. They make these books, which I've got some older versions. Kate's got a newer one called the Color Bridge. And the Color Bridge will show the CMYK and the actual Pantone ink. The Pantone ink is a specially mixed ink called a spot color. These books are very expensive. They cost hundreds of dollars. I would only recommend you get them if you're producing a lot of games in mass, you're doing the thousands of prints, and in which case where you can pay off because you can use that to talk to your printer or talk to your graphic designer or whatever and get some stuff. My main tip is though that you can go a bit more lo-fi and you can do your own test prints with a printer. So you can make your own sheet of colors or like line thicknesses, what fonts, whatever, and get them printed. And then you can use that as a guide. So this is going to be a shameless plug. Yeah.
Sounds like you might be talking about a certain tool that we've just
This is a shameless plug. So these are our draft prototype that we've made, and we've now got a later version. But we have put together at Launch Tabletop a thing called the technical deck. Yep.
Favorite card in the deck.
Wait,
and all
Kate,
three,
and this going to cost me hundreds of dollars?
No, it won't. We don't actually know how much it will cost, but
we haven't worked out the price for it yet. But
less than $20.
Oh, there you go. You've committed to something officially now. The point of this deck is that it has some like line thicknesses, so you can kind of get an idea about how thin you can go with your lines.
What you can get away with.
Yeah, it's got font sizes, colors, and so the point of this is so that you can. So for this version, this is the one that's printed by Launch Lab, which is our print on demand service at Launch Tabletop. The idea is that the customers of Launch Lab can have some idea about what if they're getting stuff printed from our equipment and our process, what it going to look like. But we are also going to be releasing this technical deck as a downloadable file. And the idea is that customers or anyone can download it and print it at home, print it on their local printer, print it with the company that they want to print their games with. And then they can see what do the oranges look like from that company, what do the greens look like, what do the blues look like, and etc. As well as like Tegan. So I'm just going to talk to you directly as if you're interested in this. But the other like the thing which is interesting is that if you were to get the tech deck printed at whatever printer you want to use, and you're working with an artist, if both of you have a copy of that, then you can look at the colors. And you can say, oh, okay, I want this shade of this pinky purple. So here's the CMYK mix. So can you use that shade? And it just means that then there's a mutual kind of baseline for you both to work from. Now, obviously, I'm really proud of this product that we've worked on. And actually all three of us, Kate, Alan, and I have been working on this. But the principle, you can apply your own self. So you can just draw in your own, like in your case, take an affinity or in whatever you want to use. You can just draw your own series of colors and series of whatever, and then have it printed by someone, and the idea will work the same. So the main thing there is to accommodate what Alan was saying before about like expecting things to be different, if you know that you're going to be using a certain printing company to print your stuff, then by getting some test prints done with this kind of range of colors, you can give yourself something to work from to go, oh, okay, if I get it printed from them, I know to expect my reds might turn out this kind of, you know, level of brightness or whatever, or color. So yeah.
Great.
I hope we went into a bit more detail there.
No, that was amazing. When I asked the question, I genuinely didn't know that you actually, would be able to answer it with physical products that solve the problem.
Well, make sure Eris has your address, because once we've got the real thing, we'll send you a copy.
Great.
There you go. Kate's just like doing all the promotion stuff today. Yeah. So this is where I feel like we should have if you're watching the show right now live, answer a code or something, and we'll send you a copy as well. The first 3 people to answer, maybe. I don't know. What do you think? So yeah, but the point is the tech deck will be coming out later this year. I don't know exactly when.
Sooner rather than later.
Sooner rather than later, and so keep an eye out for it. Those who are interested, and
a couple of other things that we've been working on that are looking pretty zhuzhy.
I see. This is what I don't know. We haven't pre-planned ahead of time. What are we announcing and what are we not announcing? So that's you and Alan.
We spoke about the designer deck. We spoke about the designer deck that we've been working on. So that's not a secret. The tech deck we had mentioned previously. I don't think we'd actually waved it at people, but we've just.
I may have in the past.
Yeah, we've just sent in the draft. The prototype version of the design kit for production.
What's the design kit, Kate?
I'm so glad you asked, Eris. It's a bunch of blank stuff in a box, basically, with a ton of dice and meeples and cubes and things that people can iterate with, things where they can write on everything with whiteboard pen, because it's all got the dry erase surface. So you're not having to write on it and it's permanent. I mean, if you want to write on it with a Sharpie, go for gold. But if you're just like, no, let's change that to a 6. There's dice, there's stuff. But there are the 3 really cool things that we're super happy with. There's the creator's notebook, there's the tech deck, and then there's the designer's deck. So they'll be in the box as well. And we will be running a giveaway as soon as I've got a copy in my hand and I can go, hey, look, this is it. And it'd be like, first person to send me their name on the back of a napkin gets a copy.
It's going to be in a big box, like a big board game box.
Yeah, it's zhuzhy. It looks lovely. The box.
Yeah. The creator notebook and the tech deck and the designer deck, they are specially like designed stuff that we put, our heart and soul.
It's not just some random crap that we threw together. It's how can we make something that's actually useful?
Design for designers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we'll see how the community responds. All right, I think it's time. We've spent way longer on this than the timetable allowed for, so I'm going to force us to move on. So before we move into the main interview, we just have a little promo video talking about Launch Lab, which is our print-on-demand service. And I'll press the video now. Launch Lab is our small batch print-on-demand service for tabletop games. Whether you want just 1 or 1,000, we have you covered. Select from our library of components to build your next game. We offer high-quality printing and components at a competitive price with fast production time, shipped to almost anywhere in the world. Go to launchtabletop.com to sign up for a free account and start prototyping now. Use the coupon code Materialise, that's MATERIALISE, at checkout to get 20% discount off your next order before shipping. Thanks for that, Eris. So, just a reminder, the code is Materialise, and if you use it at the checkout, you'll get 20% off your next order before shipping. I will just say one thing, just in case anyone had questions. The codes are single use, so if you've used it in the past, you don't get to just keep getting 20% off every single time you send an order in. Unfortunately, we're not that generous. So anyway, that's the thing. So Tegan, we're going to move into this main interview now. So here's my intro. So let's see how I go reading this out. I first met Tegan at CanCon, which is a games convention in Canberra, almost exactly 3 years ago in 2020. So in January 2020. And I was really blown away by a dexterity game that she was testing, which was called Jump to Jupiter, where you flick little, I'm going to say poker chips sized things to places on a huge mat, and their locations in the solar system. I'm probably going to remember the details wrong. The point was it was really fun. And so I met Tegan there, saw Jump to Jupiter. We stayed in touch, and then I caught up again with Tegan just last year at BorderCon, so in 2022, which is a convention happening in Albury. And I got to play a few more of Tegan's games there, which were really good as well. So some background on Tegan. Tegan is a scientist, having done her PhD in, and let's see if I can get this right, depositional history and paleo environments of the Lake Mulurulu,
Yeah.
or in Willandra Lakes World Heritage Area in New South Wales. So that was your
What a
PhD.
coincidence. That's exactly my title. That was my thesis as well.
We compare notes.
That would be amazing. Well, Alan, Tegan has actually sent me a link to the whole thesis. If you do want to read it, I can pass it on to you. I got through some of the introduction, and I had to message her back saying, I think I understood some of the words.
I'm here. I'm reading the notes on the screen, and I'm here for the analysis of fossil wombat teeth because I'm a wombat.
So I'll get to that. So yes, so this included the analyzing fossil wombat teeth and ancient sane glands. Now, Tegan, you told me, I'm going off script slightly. The wombat teeth actually got reported in the news. There was newspaper and stuff reports about it, because obviously it sounds cool I think. But you said to me that actually wasn't the most scientifically illuminating.
No, it didn't turn out to be the most useful part of the work, let's say. But it was the part that media always picked up, because it sounds really neat analysing wombat teeth, because we would look at the chemistry of the teeth to look at what the environment was like in the past. These are 15,000-year-old wombats, and looking at what the climate was like. But it was the sand grains that you said was yielding better information. Is that right? Yeah, and that's really because that part was a very applied part of it. I was using a technique that's really well developed and well understood, and so works really well. Whereas the wombat teeth part was a bit more experimental, where I was sort of testing how well that part would work. Whereas with the sand grains, that's all about dating how long ago the sediments had been deposited, so the sand.
So what did you discover? How old was it?
Billions of years? So we're looking at between sort of 150,000 years for the oldest parts to some of the younger parts on top were sort of only a couple of hundred years. The sort of key thing about it was, so you mentioned Lake Mulurulu. You may have heard of Lake Mungo, which is also in the Willandra Lakes World Heritage Area, and that's the resting place of Australia's oldest dated Aboriginal remains. And so the idea was I was comparing, this is in the same lake system, and lots of the history of the region had been done by looking at this one lake. I was looking at another one to see whether it was the same or whether you could elucidate some more information. And you really could. The layers weren't all deposited exactly at the same times. You could tell stuff about even when the glacial changes had been and things like that, with a lot of waters flowing through the lakes, and by looking at another lake in addition to that one.
I'm going to have to stop you there, because this is not a science podcast as much as we might want it to be. Maybe in the future we'll have to look at that more seriously. I'll finish my little introduction. So Tegan has also worked as a biostratigrapher, which I know I've pronounced wrong, which is also in the title of this episode.
Let's get the official pronunciation from the lady.
Yeah, well, how do you say that?
That's biostratigrapher, and that's using fossils. So bio is the fossils, stratigraphy is rock layers. So it's using fossils in rock layers to tell how old they are, or to look at what the past environments were like.
That's so awesome, and personally, I find that so interesting. Tegan has also recently worked in communications for various science organisations, and is a board member of the Australian Science Innovations, which is a not-for-profit organisation focused on inspiring high school students to explore STEM careers. So that's a very brief thing of your science thing, but probably more relevant to most of our audience here is that you're also a game designer, and you've just recently had your first game signed with the publisher. So massive congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Is it science-based? Everybody wants to know.
It is. It's the theme is around, so it's not heavily science-based. It's not a simulation or anything, but you are a naturalist collecting beetle species.
Lovely.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I'm gonna feign surprise because I have actually played a prototype of this one, so I kind of know what it's like. No, but it is, yeah, it's cool. And so I guess to lead into the main conversation is, how does your science background affect your approach to game design?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, obviously having a PhD in a particular topic, having worked in a particular area, isn't necessarily, you don't need to know how to identify fossils in rocks in order to design a game, unless that's the specific theme you're going for.
I don't know, excavating some of those old copies of Monopoly. And they've been, wet, and you're kind of peeling the money apart. Sorry,
but sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. I just saw a comment from earlier when we were reading out your PhD name, and Mike has responded saying that's the name of my next game. Thank you for that, Mike.
Excellent. I'll welcome the royalties then.
Sorry, Tegan, you were saying.
You're right. But I think a lot of the broader skill sets you get by working in science is very directly applicable to board game design process and some board game design concepts. There's through working in sciences, I'm a very analytical thinker, and obviously you don't need to have a PhD in science to have these features, but it's just some of the things I have picked up along the way. Very critical thinker, so I like to, base any decision I make is based on evidence. So I try to do. I can't say it always is, but I aspire to that. And so I think in game design, especially in playtesting, that's a really valuable approach to take. And I think, and even so you mentioned I also work in communications. In that, my current role in communications, I think also the stuff that's relevant to playtesting, which is around, so when I'm doing comms work and I draft something and send it out to feedback and you end up with sort of, review by committee, is a little bit like when you're doing playtesting. And I think a really important thing when you're playtesting is not each individual piece of feedback that you get to not go, oh, okay, let's do something with that. It's about collecting data and bringing that all together. And so, for instance, if something I've often noticed with playtesting in particular, and it also happens when people are reviewing a document or reviewing a paper, a scientific paper, they'll come to you with what they think you should do differently, rather than telling you what thing they think might needs to be addressed. And so I think that's something that I definitely, in my playtesting, try to make sure that rather than jumping to any conclusions from any particular piece of feedback, for the playtester in front of you, you want to be like, oh yeah, great, that's, I'll consider that, write it down, but then collate everything together and look for the themes and what's bubbling up, and it's less important what people are saying so much as why they're saying it.
And how they're saying it.
Yeah, that's right. And looking at, so for instance, I know in Jump to Jupiter was the disc clicking game you're talking about. Originally, the game was running too long for what the window we were trying to get, but the feedback wasn't necessarily, oh, I think it runs too long, maybe you should address that. It was other types of things about, oh, make it so that you need to collect a few, and bring the end game condition forward by making it so you need to collect fewer of these victory point tokens, or make it so individual turns are faster, or whatever. But I actually solved it by putting in an income into the game, and that sped up the overall game by having a periodic income that you would receive, which nobody had suggested. But by bringing all the data and feedback together was sort of how I came to the conclusion that actually what the problem is not necessarily that. I think a good way of looking at it, and don't quote me on this, I'm pretty sure I heard it somewhere else, was that playtesters often wrong about what's right, but right about what's wrong, if that makes sense. So,
that is a good quote.
Wrong about, that is it. And so you listen to what they're saying with regards to the taking it in, but to then later drill down into the data and bring it together to work out the actual solution. Yeah, and I think that's something that definitely I bring with me from my analytical background.
So then how do you handle like the parts of the game design process where it's really hard to get hard data on? Because I mean, even playtesting, very rarely do we get hard data. It's kind of it's a bit fuzzy. So like how do you kind of approach that, the parts that you can't quantify maybe as easily?
Throw it at the wall and see what sticks. I think is I think just play testing different types, different iterations, different versions. Just suck it and see. Often that trial and error is so important, and even like as someone with a science background, sometimes I can appreciate that. If I crunch a bunch of numbers and work out exactly what the best layout of ratios of this type of card to that type of action or whatever, that answer is out there. You can often get to it just through play testing anyway to get what feels right and what balances right. So I think nothing replaces having multiple play tests with different audiences and different people, including game designers. I think is really, really valuable because they won't necessarily jump to the conclusions. They are more inclined to talk about the balance and see the underlying causes of things. But also whoever your target audience is for the game that you're testing is super important to make sure.
If it's for 8-year-olds, you don't want to be showing it just to war gamers.
Yeah, that's right. Or even just the game designers.
Well, they're going to tell you all sorts of problems about your game that is not applicable to you.
Yes, exactly. Knowing what to ignore is really important too. And again, but that's
it's such a hard lesson. Like I struggle with that. So I know that when we were chatting before we did the episode, we started recording, you've mentioned to me how the last couple of years you've found some of the online and maybe even offline game design groups really helpful in terms of you kind of both getting to the point of having a game signed with a publisher, but also just improving your things. What specifically have you found helpful, or like what's been the beneficial part of that for you?
Absolutely. I think the online communities have been so invaluable. And I mean, partly, so I first started designing Jump to Jupiter in sort of 2018, 2019. First started playtesting it around 2019, 2020. And then, of course, COVID happened. So especially during that COVID period, but even outside of that aspect, the communities that I've met, there's people that I've been sort of communicating with online, especially so Tabletop Game Designers Australia, TGDA, has a Facebook page, and it was through that when I first designed Jump to Jupiter, it was actually when I was submitting the final version of my PhD thesis. I had it in my head and hadn't started designing it, and it was literally the day I submitted my final version and had it in, I went home and made my prototype because I promised myself I wouldn't until I got my thesis done.
That's awesome.
But so I had made this prototype, and then I had no idea what to do with it. I didn't know of playtesting as a concept. And it was through Tabletop Game Designers Australia that getting onto their Facebook group, and they'd actually just launched a mentoring program, which I think you can still do. It's something facilitated through the Facebook interface. And that got me in touch with Sean Fenmore, who is based in Canberra and has a published game and is very active in the community. And he's been absolutely amazing in just showing me around the ropes and what happens in game design and how it works and who the people are, introducing me to people. And that really made a huge difference. And then more recently, I know on TGDA...
That was Sean's game. The Stars Align.
Great little 2-player abstract game. And then TGDA has been running online playtesting sessions, and they've been really, really good as well. And initially, because Jump to Jupiter is this great big flicking game with physics and stuff like that. And I just sort of assumed that wouldn't work in Tabletop Simulator, which is one of the online platforms that you can test online with. So it wasn't until it was actually this Beetle game that I've now got the contract with that I wanted to play test that, and I got that one loaded up into Tabletop Simulator and learnt it. And I was actually really reluctant to use that to start with. I thought I was going to have to learn coding and actually input the rules of my game into the software, and sort of didn't appreciate how much it just takes care of it all for you. And it really is just a simulator of a tabletop. You just got to put in the components and then you can play with them. And actually even have Jump to Jupiter in there now as well. But so using that with people online through TGDA. And, there's a whole bunch of people in there who they're only disembodied voices to me. I don't know what they look like, but they're my friends. You know, we know each other now, and hopefully I'll see some of them at CanCon and put faces to names.
Yeah.
But, you know, that sense of community built online has been really fantastic. And then the other, I guess, key thing is, so not through TGDA, but through Board Game Design Lab. It's a US based, I believe. They were a podcast, I think, but they've got a big community as well.
So they're no longer a podcast, because I remember listening to them a few years ago. Have they stopped doing the podcast?
They recently stopped, I think. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
But they've
got a huge Facebook group. It's like,
yeah,
is it 10,000? It's huge. I can't remember. There's a lot of people in that group. Yeah.
And it was actually through some comments I made in a post on that group. Just they have a bit like TGDA does have weekly, you know, what progress have you made this week type posts and things like that. I had posted about my Beetle game there, and I actually got approached by the publisher that I've signed it with, approached me through having seen my comments there, what I'd said, checked some boxes for them of the types of games they were looking for. And that led to my publishing contract. So without those online communities, it wouldn't necessarily have happened. Yeah.
We've just got a good question from Nick. Oh, we both clicked on the same button at the same time.
We both at the same time.
Yeah.
From
Nick
Nick,
wants
who's
to
our
know about publication.
That is a good question. That is a good question.
So is it as difficult?
It's hard to say because it's
so we'll read it out. Sorry, we'll read the question out just in case anyone's not able to see the screen. Nick says, is getting a game published as hard as getting a research paper published in a good peer-reviewed journal?
Yeah.
That's the key. Good peer-reviewed journal.
Yeah. There's a lot of work that goes into both of those things. You know, getting yourself to a point where you're publishing a paper in a good peer-reviewed journal is a lot of time and research and schooling and education that goes into that. But getting a game to the point of publishing, there's a lot of work that goes into your prototyping and your play testing and your iterating. And that's just getting, I'd say getting a game to pitch ready is as hard as getting into a journal, potentially. So yeah, I'd say it's, you know, it's a really good question.
And also something I think Alan can speak to, because you were obviously a publisher for a long time. It's possible to have sign a game and it actually still never even be published because of different reasons.
So yeah,
and so even there's multiple hurdles. I think is where I'm like
the difference is that in a peer-reviewed journal, getting it published is potentially your end game. Getting a game signed is kind of like the beginning of your journey, because after that, the publishers now having to deal with getting the game made, getting it out there, and then whether or not it's successful in the marketplace, right? All the trials and tribulations there are still many sort of gates to kind of get through. So yeah,
I think it's also you go.
I was going to say that the publisher my games with, so it's their name is Tangerine Games. So if you want to watch out for what they've got coming up, but I know that they have a few other projects in the pipeline before mine. So we're looking at probably at least 2024 before mine is actually coming up. So I definitely understand plenty of things that can go wrong between now and then. But
I wasn't raising that to discourage, like to say, this is like, don't get your hopes up, because it's fantastic. It's more a case of there's just this reality that making games is hard. There's a lot of places where it can fall over, and it's not necessarily even because anyone did anything wrong. Like it just, it just can be a whole bunch of factors. So,
but there's a different. Oh, sorry, Tegan, you go.
I think there's a lot of a luck in it as well. Like the fact that the Tangerine Games, who were looking for games of a certain type, happened to look at that particular thread where I happened to mention a game of that particular type, ended up in an offer for me. Meanwhile, I've been pitching Jump to Jupiter for a couple of years now to model places, and if anyone's interested in a dexterity, light strategy dexterity flicking game, hit me up. But there's a lot of work that goes into pitching that I was just lucky to skip with that one. Whereas there's a whole other podcast worth of stuff all about getting your pitch right as well.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that if you're a successful designer with many games that your games are always going to be pitched. I mean, I've had successful game designers say that they've got, you know, a dozen games and 3 or 4 of them has just been sitting in, you know, they've been trying to pitch those games for years and they just never get picked up. So, you know, it's not necessarily that you're successful and therefore you just get more games published, not necessarily so. But there is a ray of hope for people, and just to think differently about this is that in a scientific journal situation, you're doing that in a professional degree, so there are certain stresses that come with, you know, the work that you do, especially if funding is something that you need to worry about. When it comes to board games, most people are doing it based on passion and love for the product. So as long as you are persistent in and you're enjoying the process, personally, I think it's more well, it's not like I've ever done any scientific papers, so I can't say for sure. But as far as publishing is concerned, I think that you get at least good amount of personal fulfillment just through the process of it. Even if it doesn't get published, some form of it, you're still able to share that experience with people who play tested with you, or you know, just sharing your game ideas with others. In a much more professional capacity in a scientific peer-reviewed journal.
What's
I
the
don't
saying?
know.
Publish or perish, isn't it?
Yeah, publish and perish. So there's a little bit more cutthroat aspect to it. I feel that, and it's again, you're doing it in more of a professional capacity. So as long as you're enjoying the process, even though that it might the pathway might be a bit longer, I think, yeah, I think it's worth doing. Yeah,
absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, Alan, and because I know when I got that Jump to Jupiter idea out of my head into a prototype and then getting it playtested, turn it into a real game, that was my goal, was just to get it out of my head and turn it into a game. You know, the whole concept of actually building something for publishing. And I think I wouldn't have designed Jump to Jupiter the way I had, to be honest, if I'd had publishing and marketing and manufacturing in mind. But I'm glad I didn't, because I love the game that I created with that. And then that was the goal. But I think, so far as you say, doing it it's about passion. I know that, you know, sometimes you see people asking the question, like, how do you keep yourself motivated when you start, you know, if you haven't done game design in a little bit. And my answer is, well, I just don't. If I don't feel like it, I don't do it. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. And I actually had someone ask me whether I'd be interested in a contract to design a game for a particular client. And I turned it down and pointed them towards some other people that might, because I don't want that type of stress associated with my board game design. It's something I do because I enjoy it and I want to be creating what I want to be creating.
It certainly is a different mindset. Yeah. No, sorry. Yeah.
I can relate to that. Yeah. Keep your hobby a hobby.
But that's a great point, though. It's like, it doesn't matter, because there obviously are people who are treating it as a job and a commercial enterprise, and they will take on, you know, most opportunities that come their way. And I've been there. I've done that myself, and I think that's fine. Like, and I know some of my favorite work that I've done was for clients that I would never have thought to even approach, you know, the design, if I hadn't have had the client say, "Hey, can you make me a game that does X, Y, Z?" And but equally, it can be very deflating if you aren't getting the work, and you know, like, so it kind of has the swings and roundabouts thing. So we're getting close to.
Oh, sorry, I'll just finish off. You'll just,
yeah, you go.
If you're doing commercial work, you just have to find the drive and motivation elsewhere, not based on your passion. So find it through personal growth, learning new things, or you know, challenging yourself. But don't make it your personal project.
Or just getting paid, just having money.
Or just getting paid is a good motivation too. Yeah. Just don't pin the commercial project and hope that your personal drive is going to get you there, because that's going to lead to sadness.
The odd thing about my little career is that I've earned more money from paid private commissions than from published games, but none of those paid private commissions ever got published. they all don't exist in the real world. The client hired me, I did the work, and they're all different clients, different people, and for different reasons, they just never got made. Either at some point later in the stage, other stakeholders said, no, we don't want to pursue this anymore. In the case of one, they ran it into test markets. They did a little test, a thing, and then they decided to go a different direction, as in not make a game at all. And it's just like, and so it's just like an irony. So yeah, like for me, I was glad I got paid for it, but at the same time, I totally hear what you're saying. Like finding external motivation is really important.
Yeah.
I think for me that the thing that, and it might be and maybe this is me making an uneducated connection, but I think there is something about science and game design that is similar, which is that both are kind of trying to answer questions or solve problems. One of the when I look at it, because I feel like game designers trying to like crack a nut, like you're kind of like, how do I make this mechanic work? How do I make people enjoy this experience? Or how do I get a theme to kind of fit in here, or get a game into a certain niche or market?
Yeah.
And science approach is sort of like, I guess, trying to increase understanding, answer questions. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
I kind of see a bit of an overlap there.
Have that question, you come up with a hypothesis and you test it, and then you look at the results and then you iterate. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. So we are almost out of time. So Kate, I might ask you first. Do you have a final question for Tegan?
Are there any themes or mechanics that you think deserve a bit of love, a bit neglected? Anything you'd like to see?
Oh, good question. I know a mechanic that I don't want to see loads more of. I've been playing some roll and write games lately, and I got to say, it's not my bag.
Yeah.
I missed it. Sorry, what did you say? You're a bit over what?
Roll and write games.
Roll and write. Yep, fair enough.
But yeah, they're neat. But I don't know. It just feels a very lather, rinse, repeat. Might just be the ones I've been playing. But so far as, I don't know, I don't think I have any like pet sort of favorite mechanics and stuff. So Eris has seen, so I've got 5 designs that I'm working on in various stages. The one that's been signed is Jump to Jupiter. There's 3 others. They're all very, very different. This is the dexterity one, the flicking, which is a dexterity worker placement. You flick your disc and then get your action based on where you land. And then there's the beetle one, which is you're stacking little polyominoes, so you're drafting tiles and then set collecting. And then, gosh, I've got others. The latest one I'm working on is unnamed beetle game at the moment, or untitled. Not beetle game. Sorry, that's the other one. Untitled aphid game, and your ants farming aphids on roses to get their honeydew. But that one is handfuls of dice, chucking dice everywhere. So they're all very different. And whereas Cheese and Crackers is a little 18-card game. So I'm. And
you also had one. You also had one about bushfires as well.
I did, yes. So I've got one. That's the 5th one is one about bushfires, which has dice and cards and a sort of a hand collection mechanic, like deck building sort of thing, but the hand building, and sort of a bit of dudes on a map on it. So it's I'm mechanism agnostic largely. I think.
Whatever suits the thing that you have an itch to create.
I think that's exactly right, and what suits what you're trying to do in the game, the theme and the sense you're trying to create.
Yep. Cool.
Alan, do you have a final question for Tegan?
I do. So, I find that board games is a very effective vehicle for providing education to players in a very sort of interactive way. So, you can learn about what we're seeing, critical thinking skills, or even like CO2, which is about climate change. Because you're doing it in board games some of these board games can be quite intricate in the way that this design, the systems and how it interacts, and it gives insight to people understanding the subject matter. So if you are Queen of Earth, and you are able to create a game that is going to promote social change, what would be the game that you want society to play?
That's an easy one. It's going to be climate change and getting people understanding and on board, and not just people, but the governments and everything getting that impetus happening.
But you're going to find
I don't need to though, because someone already is. I don't know if any of you guys know what his name is. Otherwise, I'd give him a plug. Climate is the name of the game. I know it's an Australian designer who's also a scientist, I believe, and working on a game called Climate.
You just make sure that when you're doing Earth, it's not a flat one. Just to make sure that
don't want to give the wrong impression.
Confirmed. Earth is flat. Look at the board.
Now I'm trying to picture you're going to have a box that's a perfect square though to fit a sphere inside.
No, you can do
if you're not having a board, if you're having a three-dimensional sphere,
and then you do layers,
components magnetic around the screen.
Yeah. And
make the planet the box.
Yes.
Very cool.
Go inside at the end.
The game comes inside.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, there's a lot of possibilities.
And
there.
manufacturing companies everywhere just went, oh my God.
I was going to say, can Launch Lab get that up for me?
It'd be fun.
How about we just go more
globes? The original globes that they made were basically papier-mâché paper spheres. It can be done. I mean,
we could go more lo-fi. You could just get like plain soccer balls and use dry erase markers, and you have to draw on the sphere, or it's not quite a sphere, is it technically? But you know what I mean.
The squishy ones that you use for Pilates, you blow them up. You draw them.
Oh, imagine having to blow up the board every time.
You get a cardio workout at the same time.
I think what you're trying to say, Eric, was
and yourself.
Earth is a oblique spheroid at the moment. I think that's what you're saying.
Oh. Yeah, well, I was thinking soccer balls have the flat sides. What do you call it when it's got the multiple flat sides to make the sphere? Like it's a low poly, basically.
Polyhedron.
Yeah. But it is also isn't it true that the Earth isn't a sphere? It is, like you said, it's like
it's
a
Yeah. And without the water, it's very lumpy in strange ways.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are at an hour, so we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you very much, Tegan, for your time and everything. And thank you very much, Kate, for co-hosting and being here and your beautiful and wonderful questions. And thank you, Alan, for always throwing in curveballs and perspectives that I haven't thought of. So thank you both.
We didn't get Alan's power tool of the week.
No, we haven't. We haven't. Oh, okay. Well, you can go think about.
I'll tease it for next week. Yeah, next week we'll show something.
Next week we'll show something. Okay, so thank you.
Speaking of next week,
I'll get to that. Let me try and follow my script at least once. I almost never follow this thing correctly. So Tegan, how can people best follow along with your game design journey? Are there any links that you would like us to share? And I already know the answer to that question.
Yep. So you can reach me. I'm not particularly active at posting stuff, but you can reach me at Discord and Twitter. I think my handles are down below.
So Tegs plays game. Tegs or Teagues? How do you say it? Teagues plays games. Teagues plays games, and Teague tweets. Yep.
Yes. But if you want to get alerted to the upcoming title, you're best off following Tangerine Games. I think we've got a link for them too. So that's their website. They've got a bunch of social media. They're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Discord. And if you follow them, you'll see my one will come up eventually. Hopefully.
Yeah, and you said it's slated for 2024. Is that what you said before?
I think so. I think I'm not 100% sure because obviously
it's all early days. Yeah,
it's very early days, and I think they're planning to do quite a bit of development with it. They've got a vision that I'm really excited to see. What they do with it. But I don't know exactly what the timeline is on that. I just know they've got a few games ahead of it in their plans.
Yeah. Well, that's a good segue because we say this almost every week, but I do genuinely mean it. We'll get you back on later in the year or in however long and do an update, see how things are going, see where things are at with the all of that development stuff and whatever.
Yeah, especially once I've got an actual date and timeline for my one, I'll be very keen to promote it.
Yeah. To talk about that, it'd be great. So thank you everyone who's been in the chat and who's watched the show either live, and especially also thank you to everyone who watches the show after it's gone onto YouTube or Facebook after the fact. Please post comments if you have, especially on YouTube. Facebook isn't quite as good for it, but for YouTube, if you post comments on the video, then we can talk to you and answer them. Or if you've got thoughts and you want to, share them about maybe your experience with science and board games or any other kind of connected thing, and we'd love to hear that. You can also talk to us and propose topics on our Discord, which is ltt.ltd/s/discord. So that's where you can talk to us as the Launch Tabletop team in regards to Launch Lab or anything else that we do. But also we're really open and we'd love to just talk about game design and making games and producing games. And so feel free to join us there. You can also follow us on YouTube. I don't have a link or a URL for that. I don't think we're quite big enough yet to get the custom URL. So maybe that's why you should like our page and then we can get a custom URL. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Launch Tabletop. And Materialise is produced by Launch Tabletop. Please visit launchtabletop.com to find out more about Launch Lab, our print-on-demand tabletop game platform, and sign up for a free account. If you use the code Materialise, you get 20% off your next order, not including shipping. I'm Eris, I've been your host, and this has been Materialise, the Launch Tabletop podcast. So we're going to do the outro in a moment. I will just mention next week, which Kate started to allude to before, we have Jonathan Gilmore coming on. He is the designer of a whole bunch of games, but like some of the big ones are Dead of Winter, Kids on Bikes, and the dinosaur one. I've forgotten the name. Dinosaur Island. Yeah, it has a dinosaur in the name. But honestly, he's worked on so many projects, and so he's coming on. We will be at a different time again next week because it'll actually be on the Thursday as far as Australia time goes, but it'll be the Wednesday evening for those of you in North America. So keep an eye on our YouTube and Facebook for updates on that. And after the closing video, if you just want to hang around, Tegan, we've got 5 questions for our soon-to-be world-famous questionnaire, and we'd love to get your answers. So thank you, everyone here, and thank you for everyone who's listening and at home. All right, so this is the Materialise questionnaire. Tegan, here are 5 questions, and we promise to judge you harshly by your answers. So the first question is, are you more of a heart, a diamond, a club, or a spade?
The geologist in me, I think, will have to say a diamond because
I thought you were going to say spade for a second.
No, that's the person who's doing the labor. This is the diamond is what gets encrusted in the soils. Yeah.
I did use a lot of spades digging up a lot of sand grains. But no, I'll say a diamond because I love rocks and minerals and gemstones for the geological side of things. So I'll say diamond for that reason.
Fantastic. Question number 2, dinosaurs who are pirates or robots who are ghosts?
Oh, so this is tricky. So dinosaurs and robots both have that sciencey aspect to them. But again, my work's always been in the past more than the sci-fi future stuff. So I'll say dinosaurs who are pirates because also pirates are awesome. And ghosts are me. I'm very not interested in science stuff at all. So no interest in ghosts. So dinosaurs who are pirates.
Fantastic. What's your favorite, question number 3, what's your favorite snack or drink when playing a tabletop game?
Good question. I'm a big fan of a cheese board, cheese and crackers type. Like just having a little gathering of people at home. And in fact, one of my game designs is called Cheese and Crackers. So that's very thematic to have that with that. So I think that's probably up there. But I think if I'm, say, coming to a tabletop convention or a day and just need to bring a bowl of something, I always go for grapes. I think grapes are great because they're really self-contained, they're healthy. They don't get your food messy. You can just pop them in one by one. It's like a bowl of lollies, but not too bad for you. So grapes.
Before we move on, thank you for that. Before we move on, I mentioned recently that Alan got me trying M&Ms again, which I hadn't had for ages because he answered M&Ms to this question a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was reminded by watching some other video on YouTube about Smarties. And so I went and got Smarties, and I just tried to describe the other week these little fun-sized boxes. But the thing about them that I find amazing is they've got a perforation along the front here, which means that it opens up with this angled like lid. It's just beautifully designed. It's a tiny little box, and it's so much, for me, like engineering has gone into thinking about the dies and the fold and the everything. And it also took me 10 boxes before I realized that perforation was there. I used to just rip open the top. But the thing it's like the thing that impresses me is it kind of reminds me a little bit of what we do when we're making boards or board game, like components in board games, where you're trying to think about die lines and dimensionality to what you're doing. And so I just thought if, Smarties can have a cute little fun design thing, maybe we can try and do them for some of our...
You know why it's designed like that, right? Because if you tip it upside down, then it's going to catch. And then, yeah.
Yeah. And I do that. I love it. I do little, like I'll put some into the little lid and then I'll pull them out. Yeah, it's working.
I think
it is such an elegant design.
I think it's ironic that something that's designed for basically 6-year-olds, they think that kids are going to go, oh, look, there's a perforation. I'll just open it there.
No,
give me that Smartie.
Yeah. But I just, for me, like, I think it's one of the things about kind of any type, like using design broadly, just as in humans crafting objects, I just think is amazing. And when you see products where genuine effort has gone into it, I just really appreciate it. So, sorry, that's my little segue, my ongoing segment about the candies that I consume.
So, as a cheese aficionado, what's a desperately underrated cheese?
Oh, that's a good question. I quite like Jarlsberg as a hard cheese. The face is coming from Kate.
What's wrong with it, Kate?
It's gross.
And there's a particular...
Well, that wasted space. It's got holes, dude. That could be taken up by cheese.
There's a Gouda at, I think it's either Coles or Woolies. It's like at one or not the, but not the other. That has, I forget whether it's caraway or cumin. I think it's cumin. They've got cumin seeds through the Gouda, and that is like really good.
Nice.
I love a bit of Havarti. Havarti is a very underrated cheese.
There you go.
Yeah,
I'm really boring. I just like cheddar and tasty cheddar. Is tasty cheese cheddar as well?
Yeah,
that's
like
a cheap. If I'm feeling really fancy, I'll get one of the vintage ones, but I don't generally like them as much. I just like your
again.
Standard.
That's just cheddar with a different age on it.
Yes. I'm so boring. All right, I think we'll move on to the next question. So question number 4 is cards or dice?
Well, like I said before, I'm fairly mechanism agnostic. I think each one has its place, depending what you're trying to do. I guess if I had...
Yeah, but sitting at the table, someone hands you a box that's full of cards.
Game, and that's all I know.
What are you going for?
You can't go past the tactile handful of dice. I do enjoy that, so I think that's okay.
I love you. It's the wrong answer.
Disappointment is palpable. Kate is not a dice fan. I love it.
It's fine. Yeah. Other people love them, and that's fantastic. It'd be boring if we all like the same thing. I'm sitting here going, yeah, someone else likes dice. What's that? 3 people.
You're allowed to like dice, but it's the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Oh boy,
I like cards. Cards are really versatile and pretty. Also, I'm less likely to throw them at something and have them go off the far side of the table.
I always, because you know how you can buy the metal dice like for RPG sets and and D6s and stuff. Like I know they feel nice and they can be like the weight of them can be good to roll, but I used to own a glass dining table, like glass topped dining table, and I'd be like, I would never want someone to roll a metal dice on that because it's like scary.
No, if you're really into dice, you should have a dice tray. That's what dice tray.
True, I know, proper dice tray, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And dice house, yeah. Okay, final question. What fictional character would you invite to a game night?
I think I have to say, well, I have a favourite fictional character, which is Captain Janeway. From So
That's a
I think
good
it would
answer.
have to be her. I don't know how much fun she'd be at the game table. So
I
maybe
think
let's
she'd be
say,
a real rules lawyer.
yeah, let's say the whole major cast from Star Trek Voyager, because I think that could be fun. I think Paris would probably be a lot of fun. And I think so long as Tuvok and Neelix are both there, then that could sort of balance out the vibe around the table, I think.
It'll end in a punch-up between those two. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Janeway is such a good... And I imagine Janeway would also be, like, super strategic. Like, she'd just be really... Yeah, interesting.
And Tuvok would just sit there and constantly cast shade on everybody's decisions. Well, that's just totally irrational.
Exactly. He'd expect people to do the logical thing, be really mad, or not mad, but like be calling out when they're not behaving logically, and therefore he can't beat them.
Yeah.
Such a good answer. All right. Well, that's about it. So thank you, Tegan, again. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Kate. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And we will see you next time. And I'll press the button. Bye.
Bye, everyone.